Favorite NPC? Well, if you've watched the videos on my channel, you've pretty much met most of them. When I think immediately for favorite NPC, I usually think of two broad categories. One are like NPCs in the sense of people who might work with the PCs or interact with the PCs in a beneficent or at least not adversarial manner. I think of Strovil. We talked about Strovil the other day. And Strovil, in my campaign world as of right now, is dead, but he's a ghost, and he haunts a library that's... I think I might have even mentioned this in the Trocare video. So there's a grand library that has existed for quite some time, and is... The inside of it isn't completely ruined, although there are ruined portions of it, and it's buried halfway underground. And Strovil is a ghost, and he died in the library, and he haunts the library, and essentially spends all of his eternity going through reading the books and learning everything he possibly can. And the PCs are able to interact with him in that sense when they need to research the answer to some question, so they can make their way to the library, which is not an easy, safe trek. And then they can get into the library and find Strovil. And now, Strovil would love to just give them the information, but he can't. Part of his haunting servitude to the library is that he has to demand recompense for it. And the library doesn't want gold or magic items or anything like that. That's useless. You have to bring new knowledge to the library for the knowledge that you want from it. So the PCs then have to go adventure somewhere else, obtain some amount of new knowledge. It could be that they go find a book on history somewhere in a dungeon and they bring it over. That's great. It could be something that they themselves put together. They've mapped some area. They've explored some set of runes. They've written up a report on it and bring it to the library. And in exchange, they'll get information that they need to get them somewhere else. It's what's called an adventure engine. And Strovil and the library are very nice, and I like them a lot. I don't know if I would say they're my favorite, though. Some of my old characters, as I mentioned in the video a couple days ago, like Mikhail is now the Black Duke, and I really like him. He's presented as a kind of villain through other people. Everyone assumes that the Black Duke is a villain and he's evil and he does all these terrible things. But the reality of the situation is he's not evil. He's actually a very good person, and he's constantly fighting against an evil god in order to make everything better. But the PCs could really screw that up if they keep hearing everybody talk about how evil the Duke is and all these evil things he does, and then when they show up, just, don't clarify the matter. One person I haven't talked about in too much detail is Cervantes Ordóñez. And he was my two-weapon fighter. And in the future, because I just love the idea of it, he rides on... Back in 2nd edition, they came out with an issue of Dragon magazine that featured drakes. Now, drakes were non-magical dragon-like creatures. They had 4 legs. Actually, no, I don't think they had 4 legs. Maybe some of them did. Anyway, they had legs and wings. They looked like dragons. They had breath weapons, but their breath weapons were entirely non-magical. So, like, one of them had like a bladder inside its mouth that it would fill with like swamp water. And then when it needed to, it could squeeze out and, just shoot forth a gush of this nasty, diseased swamp water. There was another one that cultivated bees and wasps inside that same kind of bladder. So there was like a beehive or a wasp's nest inside of its mouth, and when it needed to, the muscular action of that bladder would agitate all of the insects, and then it would spit out like a big wad of bees or wasps at you. It was a very, very popular article, and I wanted Cervantes to ride one of them in the air, wielding his 2 swords in full plate mail armor. There's actually a floating island in Trocaire. I think I might have mentioned it before. And Cervantes is part of the defense force for that island, and they have flying steeds. So if someone were to try and attack it using their own flying steeds, they have a counter air force to take it out. I like that, but I haven't used that ever in game yet. The games I've never been anywhere long enough to get the game high enough level for that to happen since Cervantes, because I've been going to school and moving around and everything. I really like, trying to think of other ones that are good before moving on to the second one, but I'll stop there and move on to the second category. The second category, and probably where my absolute most favorite NPCs are, is the villains category. I love creating villains. I've talked about many of them here on the channel. Well, actually, no. I've talked about a few of them here on the channel. Saren Colmer absolutely terrifies me, and I love her so much. She's one of my favorite villains that I've ever created, in part because I created so much extra material for her. I mean, I have like the journal entries. I created the whole group around Saren Colmer as the main member. Although technically Garrett was created before her. And I really liked the kinds of little details and things that I added into her writings that kind of give it away. Where if someone was really paying attention, they'll notice, hey, we found these 3 journal entries, and every one of them makes a reference to farming. So maybe she was a farmer, which is totally true. I really like Radek the Toad. He's cool. I like the Asp. I don't think I've done a video on the Asp, but he's an old man who creates poisons, and I wrote up an entire mini dungeon for him. It's just a couple rooms, and of course they feature poison heavily. One of the guys that I haven't written anything for yet, but he's part of that same group, is the Wyvern or Wyvern. No, that's not what they call. That's a different guy. The Kraken. The Kraken is a guy. He's my favorite because his name, the Kraken, even ignoring the movie, since I created this before that stupid movie came out, he sounds like he's going to be some big powerful guy, but he's not. Of the guys I created, he is the least powerful of all of them. He's just a dude who owns a boat. He's a little dinky fisherman. It's not even like a big boat. It's a little rowboat. And but he is amenable to the cause of the Chaos Cults, and just rows back and forth across the river and smuggles supplies and people inside the city for them. But he gets the cool name like the Kraken. The Wyvern or Wyvern. I say Wyvern. I know people say Wyvern. The Wyvern is a really crazy-ass guy who happens to have a poison dagger. A magical dagger. A dagger of venom, I think is what they call it. And he has illusions of grandeur, but he's really just some homeless crazy guy who stabs people, and for whatever reason is more willing to stab people when the Chaos Cults tell him. So that's a fun little group. Of course, the Fangs of the Worm, which I might have mentioned in a video before, which has Dimitri von Reinstadt, the Dragon King, Groder, who I did talk about the other day, the evil priest, Marhalt Elsdragon, a name that I got from my best friend. I was creating this character, and I needed a name, and I asked my friend, Chuck, I need a name for this guy, and Chuck's like, Marhalt Elsdragon, and I'm like, that is so awesome. See, this is why I ask you these questions, Chuck, is because you're so good at making up names. So I named him Marhalt Elsdragon, only to find out later, when we were playing Magic the Gathering, that the name comes from a Magic card. But that doesn't matter. I still love the name. Marhalt Elsdragon is probably one of the closest contenders with Saren Colmer for coolest NPC or favorite NPC. So Marhalt Elsdragon is a drow elf, but he always wears a hat of disguise and makeup on top of that. He disguises himself with a mundane disguise and then uses the hat of disguise on top of that. So even if you can see through the magic of the hat of disguise, he's still disguised. and like true seeing and all that doesn't see through mundane disguises. Anyway, he's a drow. He disguises himself as a regular elf, and he has a whole little troop. And I created everyone in this little troop too. And they travel from town to town, and they're entertainers. He has an understudy. There's a girl who wants to become a bard, and so she travels with him and learns the trade. There's a pair of farm boys. They're actually twins, and they travel around as well, wanting to learn a little bit about the bardic trade, but not to the same degree that she does. There's an old woman who thinks that it's not nice that he has to travel from town to town and just kind of scrape by, so she travels along with them and is kind of like a mother for the whole group, makes dinner and all that stuff. Then there are these two farmers. One is, and he's a little bit older. He's probably in his 40s or something, but he's a grizzled, old, crazy guy. And he is just convinced that Marholt is the best bard, the greatest person ever. And anybody who says any differently, man, they're going to get a fist right in their face. He is aggressively in favor of Marholt. The other one is a real big guy, and probably he's younger than the old grizzled farmer. And he follows Marholt around as a bodyguard constantly. He can't talk because he doesn't have a tongue. Marholt always tells people that he had saved this man from a group of thugs, but he wasn't able to get them away from him before they cut out his tongue. In truth, Marholt cut the guy's tongue out so he could never tell anybody about Marholt's true identity. And there was a prestige class in the 3rd edition Sword and Fist. I believe it was in Sword and Fist. That's the very first class supplement that came out with extra options for fighters, barbarians, and I don't know if barbarians were in there, but yeah, those guys. And one of the options that they had was called a devoted defender. It was a prestige class, and it was so broken. If you had an NPC that would follow your PC around to do this, they could block attacks for you. And they would roll an attack roll or a reflex save or something against the opponent's attack roll. And if they beat it, then you didn't get hit. And then they also had an ability where if you did get hit, they could jump in front of it and take the damage for you. And they had all kinds of special abilities that protected their charge. And so Marholt has one of those. And so if the PCs ever were able to get close enough to do like melee combat on Marholt, he has a guy who's blocking attacks and taking the damage for him as he escapes. And he's really good at escaping. But the best thing about Marholt was that it depends on when I used him. I have played with him before in a campaign, so he showed up before. But sometimes the PCs do something that pisses him off, and that is what leads into his whole shtick. And sometimes he just picks people at random, and PCs happen to be them, and runs into his whole shtick. And when I say picks people at random, it's more that the Fangs of the Worm recognize that the PCs are going to be a threat or a potential threat, and Marholt sabotages them. So what Marholt does is he's constantly traveling around the countries, from city to city and town to town and village to village, and he performs, and he helps to spread news, because that's one of the things bards do. And he spreads all these vile, nasty, terrible rumors about the PCs. And so from town to town, when the PCs get there, everybody hates them. They're not able to buy supplies. They're not able to rent a room at the inn. Sometimes people are outright violent towards them, which is a bad idea, because now the PCs go around killing villagers in self-defense. And when he's not making life miserable for a group of PCs, he's just a serial killer. He's a rapist. He's an arsonist. He's a thief. So Marholt just does bad things in all these towns, but because he's so good at manipulating public opinion, everybody loves him first, and then it just so happens that he'll leave a town, and after he's left, he'll come back in a day or two in disguise, looking like someone else, and commit a crime of some sort, and then leave again. So people think, oh, as soon as he left, that's when all the bad stuff started happening. So, we got to keep him on. We would love it when he's around because nothing bad ever happens when he's around. Or sometimes before he gets to a town, he'll hire like some hobgoblins or goblins or orcs or something to attack the town or attack someone in the town or nearby or something, and then he'll swoop in and save the day. So like maybe there's a farmstead and he hires a group of orcs to go in there, and then they start breaking crap and stealing things, and they'll attack the family that's inside, and then Marhalt will show up with his troop and they'll fight off, just happen to be happening by and seeing smoke from the fire or whatever, and they'll save the people's lives. And so now this guy, who's he's lived here his whole life, everyone in town knows him, he comes troping into town and telling everybody, yeah, this guy, orcs were attacking and this guy saved me. And that's actually the crazy old guy who will punch you in the face if you say something bad. That's how he met Marhalt. Marhalt hired some people to come in there and they killed his family, but Marhalt swooped in and saved that guy. Sometimes he'll lure people away from town, like particularly like with the serial killing thing. He'll lure someone out of town. Usually it's a young woman. And everybody will think, that she's just traveling with him, and, he'll kill her or something. Or sometimes, he'll leave and the person specifically, will run off after him. He'll plant the idea in someone's mind while he's in town. And then when he leaves, that person then kind of maybe takes it up on themselves to run off. He'll talk about how awesome it is traveling on the road, living the free life in the next town over. He'll talk about, all these awesome things that I've done the last time I was in that town that I'm going to do again. It's a shame that, you can't come with me. And then he'll leave, and then that person will decide, oh, you know what? That sounds awesome. I think I'll go after. And so they'll run away on their own, and then they end up dead. Or sometimes Marhalt will manipulate them in the next town and get them to do things, steal things, or maybe commit a crime and use them as a scapegoat. So he's a really evil person. I mean, like really super evil person, but not in the normal way. So it takes a while to figure out that he's the guy behind all this, because everywhere you go, everyone loves Marhalt. Everyone can tell you stories about how he saved them and, stopped this threat to town, or, he gave away gold, or he built this orphanage, because he does things like that to manipulate people. I might have mentioned, I don't remember if I ever did a video on my 4 iconic bards, but one of them is the bard as manipulator, and that was Marhalt. I created 4 bards that covered the 4 kind of iconic roles I see bards in. One is a knowledge master, one is a musician, one is the political activist, and one is the manipulator. And Marhalt is the manipulator. And if you go far enough in the old campaign world that I had, these were bards of legend. Like if you were to think back on the greatest bards who ever lived, these were the 4 greatest bards who ever lived, and Marhalt was one of them. But that was a different version of Marhalt that existed. I mean, he still did the same terrible kinds of things, but in a different way. But anyway, yeah, somewhere it's either Saren Colmer or Marhalt Elsdragon that is my favorite NPC of all time that I've run. I've had favorite NPCs in other games that are pretty cool. But I think those 2 are right up there. I'm actually playing a version of Marhalt right now in one game where I'm playing the great and powerful Trexler. And he keeps talking about how he's so awesome and he does all these awesome things. And unfortunately, the dice keep coming up Millhouse for me. I say, I roll an attack and I miss. And I tell the party, it was literally my first attack roll in the fight. So I'm like, Trexler just needs to warm up and stretch out real quick. And so on the next turn, I roll a critical hit, and I kill the thing. And I'm like, see? Told you. Trexler knows what Trexler does. And, yeah, it was fun. And the party's buying into it. I'm trying to engender an antagonistic attitude by talking about how awesome Trexler is, and how when one of the other PCs misses on attack, Trexler tries to give them tips and help them out, but in a condescending way. But they are eating it up and loving it, and it's so hard to become, the guy who's full of himself when everything he does goes right and everything he tells the other people to do goes right. So it's just like this self-fulfilling prophecy. All right, well, until next time, bye-bye.